Is it showing that I'm there?
Yes, we have you.
Okay, great, thanks.
It's just your packet.
Okay, so it's all here to show only one speak or something like that?
Yeah.
And vote.
Are you all set? Okay, good morning. I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors meeting to order on Tuesday, March 23rd at 9 a.m. In order for everyone to hear, would you please silence any noisemakers that you may have today? Please join me to pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
Of the United States
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Did you flip it?
No.
I'm gonna see it. Yes. All right, we have 17 present. Wait now, wait, hold on. So we have Russ Nick is here. And two absent, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so 19.
Okay, we have 19 present and 2 absent. Before we get started on the agenda, I just want to make a brief comment. We have a number of items on the agenda today that are probably going to have some passionate discussion, which is fine. I do want to let everybody know that I expect everybody to be courteous and respectful of each other. No derogatory remarks, no personal insults or directed comments. All comments in any discussion should be directed to the chair, and I will recognize those people in our new system as it comes up. We're also following our rules of order when it has to do with speaking today. You're allowed to speak twice. The first time up to 3 minutes. If you're recognized the second time, it's 2 minutes. Okay. Presentation of the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry.
They aren't gonna be on because they aren't on. They aren't on.
Oh, I'm sorry. They're on when you get consent to speak, they get turned on. Yeah.
You weren't coming through my speaker box, so I wasn't picking you up, so thank you.
My little thing, pick me out, says sign in, and then it says users already logged in. Yeah, she's in on there.
She's in.
She might have started something maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a motion in a second for the agenda.
Presentation of the agenda. We have a motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Correspondence. In your packet, we have the unassigned fund balance, a Don Fricks email, Mr. Wittenberg email, another Don Fricks email. In addition, there was additional emails that were in correspondence that was passed out this morning as part of the hard copy packet that should have been on your desks or added to the packet. Public comment. Is there anybody wishes to make a public comment?
He has pushed, well, with Alexis with it.
Okay, so for public comment, we have, if there's individuals who'd like to speak, I know we have some individuals in the Peninsula room. I don't know if they wanted to speak. Jason, do you know? Oh, okay. So if you would like to speak, for those that are online, there's 2 ways of doing so. You can, if you're on the phone, you can hit a *3 and I can recognize you and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes. Likewise, if you're on a computer, you can, in the system, raise your hand and I can give you the floor as well for the 3 minutes. So right now I do have a single hand raised up for call-in user. I will unmute you and you have the floor. Call-in user?
Good morning, Don Fricks, 8305 Quarterline Road, Fish Creek. Thank you for paying attention to my correspondence for those who have. I have a couple comments about our elected representatives that I will endeavor to relate back to how it affects the county. And then I have 3 little points about some things I'd like to see the county to do to better inform the public. So first off, I think it's important to mention that I'm noticing a pattern from Representative Mike Gallagher. I called out his fear-mongering about China. Last month, I called out his vote, which essentially was basically, allowed continued genocidal treatment of Americans and promulgation of global warming as he opposed the Biden administration's order to shut down the Keystone Pipeline. This last week, 8 women were murdered, several being of Asian descent. And we had Mr. Gallagher voted against reauthorization of H.R. 1620, which was reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. And we've seen some kind of nonsense from the hometown of the mass murderer of these 8 women and a reluctance to add hate crime enhancements to the heinous crime. And, our representative for the 8th Congressional here should already know that women are already federally recognized as a protected class under enhanced hate crime provisions, so penalties, sorry. But anyway, so his vote, I want to relate it back to the county, is how does this kind of attitude help us deal locally with domestic violence issues with an example such as he set with his vote against reauthorizing H.R. 16, the Violence Against Women's Act.
You have 30 seconds.
I called his office and asked for public comment from him, and he hasn't. Lastly, this is not enough time. I'd like to see the minutes, the draft minutes of the meetings published as soon as possible like they used to be. We need to know what goes on in meetings when they only happen every other month, and in the meantime, there's a county board meeting making decisions about that information. So,
thank you.
If time is up, thank you for listening, and this is not enough time.
Okay, I have another call-in user. I don't know the name, obviously, but if you could, I'll unmute you, and you have the floor for 3 minutes. Call-in user. I have you unmuted. You can try speaking.
Good morning. My name is Pat Szynski. I am the current chair of the League of Women Voters of Door County. I'm here to speak in support of Resolution 31, Door County's vision of diversity and inclusion. The League of Women Voters applauds the county board for its efforts to become part of the growing number of state and local units of government that are taking steps toward furthering goals of diversity and inclusion. Equity should be added to these goals, since without it, there is no true inclusion. We need to acknowledge that the inequity and discrimination that all disadvantaged groups have faced is institutional and systemic, that is, intentional through policy and law over the years. 3 years ago, our local league sponsored a presentation titled Racial Disparities in Wisconsin and here in Door County, as state and local expert panel members explored how racism affects the state of Wisconsin, including Door County, the facts of racial disparities in health outcomes, education, income, and other benchmarks were hard to hear and difficult to acknowledge. In the discussion period which followed, a number of people in the audience stood to share personal stories of their experiences with the discrimination in Door County. These included being turned away at restaurants and rentals when their reservations disappeared, having food accidentally spilled on them, being told, "Go back where you came from," our guest workers being shouted at for not having perfect English, incidents of bias and what is now called microaggression in the school system. These stories were even harder to hear, but the truth is that stories like these are part of the daily experience of some of our students, our residents, and those who visit our county. Yes, discrimination, even racism, does exist here, as it does everywhere in our state and country. Over the past few years, the League has also joined the process of acknowledgement and redress. Our policy now declares that the League is an organization fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are central to the organization's current and future success in engaging all individuals, households, communities, and policymakers in creating a more perfect democracy. The policy then lists 28 separate characteristics that may be identified as examples of diversity. The League's policy goes far beyond race to include discrimination of all kinds. Equity is acknowledged as a necessary component of inclusion. Many other organizations, businesses, governmental bodies are also beginning the process of self-reflection and exploring ways to support inclusion, diversity, equity for all groups in our country. The County of Door is well served to join in this process. It begins with having a vision and aspiration for where we want to be and our intention to follow up with action.
You have 20
The League of
seconds.
Women Voters of Door County urges County Board to pass this resolution, then follow up with concrete steps to uncover inequities and work to fix them. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Allen, I have you unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the board for allowing the public to attend a meeting like this virtually, particularly in COVID times. I want to address the issue that is on today's agenda, which is the reconsideration of the ATV route that was passed on February 23rd by this board, which it adds to the ATV trail list by adding the section from County PD down to Elm at the city line, Elm and Duluth in the city line. I think at the time that the board, and prior to that, the Highway and Airport Committee considered this route, there were a lot of facts that they weren't aware of at the time and some additional issues that have come up that I think reconsideration and removal of this route is a wise thing for the county to do, not only for all the county residents, but to allow the city the time to figure out what the city wants to do. At the Parking and Traffic Committee a few months ago, the Parking and Traffic Committee had a lot of items they thought that the city should address before imposing ATV routes on anyone. They did none of that. The Parking and Traffic Committee then sent an unauthorized letter to the county as well as to the town. They did not have the authority to do that. That sort of kicked off the county route and the town also doing a route. The Parking and Traffic Committee is now subject to an open meeting complaint. So there's also a lot of issues with safety on that road. ATVs would have to be 25 miles an hour, which creates an enforcement or hazard issue on that road. The Parking and Traffic Committee said that the city would extend a route to Bullhead Point. The DNR does not allow ATVs to ride upon any property that's below the ordinary high water mark, and Bullhead Point is below the ordinary high water mark. In other words, the city can't even do its own route. So I hope that the board would repeal that route and consider it only after the city has gotten its act together. They're sort of in chaos at that committee, and wait for the city to have a comprehensive ATV plan. And then if at that point, upon authority of the council, that the county is asked to bring a connecting route, then at that point the county should do so. At this moment, if the county does not rescind this route, it'll be a route to nowhere, and ATVs will end up at the very dangerous intersection of Elm, Duluth, and County C, and would have to turn around in that intersection where the route at this exact moment ends. So please reverse what was done, which was premature. Bring it back in the future if it makes a lot of sense at that point. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Christine Reed, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Christine Reed. I live in Forestville on Mill Pond. I wanted to comment on the administrator report, Mill Pond project. The county is drawing down Mill Pond to compact the sediment over a 2-year period. This has no significant updates to provide, and that water levels are fluctuating, which has been happening since the beginning of this project. As far as compacting sediment, this is not a complete and accurate report on the goal of the project, which is to compact the sediment in the Mill Pond. Over the past year and a half, significant amounts of the sediment that was in Mill Pond has now flushed downstream. And this isn't speculation. For anyone who's interested in what their vote has done to the watershed, to the citizens of Southern Door, they can simply look at it. If you stand on the Anapee Trail next to the Anapee River, which is literally just steps away from the Anapee Trail, below the dam and between County J and the dam, stand on the trail, stand on Mill Road, look down at the Anapee River, and you will see the sediment that has accumulated below the dam, mounds of sediment. Calculations are being done on how much that is, and it's easy to say that it is thousands of tons of sediment. So the sediment is not compacting. And there are other contributing factors. I've heard some of the progress updates in the past that say they're achieving the goal. It's obvious that that's not happening. So my question is, and I've asked this question several times, what are the met or missed milestones? What are the thresholds that this project has established to show that you are meeting your goal of compacting sediment? And if you don't meet those thresholds,
30 seconds.
milestones, when do you reevaluate your plan and take corrective action? That's all.
Thank you. The Peninsula Room also wanted, there's some individuals in the Peninsula Room who also wanted to speak. I have the room unmuted. If you could please give us your name and address. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, I'm Deanne Jackson. I live on North Duluth, 3453, just near the intersection of County C and North Duluth. Last night, I attended the Sturgeon Bay Parking and Traffic Committee meeting, and there were 10 passionate speakers that have a lot of safety concerns about ATVs being allowed on North Duluth, and especially PD to the intersection, PD on C to the intersection of Duluth, where there's already a lot of traffic at that intersection. At the meeting, the vote did not happen, so they are actually delaying anything further with the ATV trail on North Duluth until the meeting on April 26th, where they're going to look at it again. It was a very passionate meeting, and the people that attended the meeting that talked on behalf of North Duluth Ave and not having ATVs allowed on North Duluth Ave had very strong cases, especially for safety concerns. And also the speed of what ATVs actually go compared to the 10 miles an hour they're not supposed to exceed when they're around other pedestrians. So there are many reasons not to move forward with allowing ATVs on County C from PD to North Duluth intersection. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone else in the Peninsula Room who wanted to speak? All right, thank you. I do have another individual who raised their hand as a call-in user. Call-in user, I have you unmuted. You have 3 minutes on the floor, starting now. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Jeff Deschler, Bailey's Harbor. I'm one of the property owners on Sand Dune Shores, and this is in relation to Door County parcel number 00200692833D. You received some correspondence over the weekend, which I heard referred earlier in the call. This is about a sale of a property on 57 in Sand Dune Shores, 4 acres adjacent to Meridian Park. I did not write a letter. I did not have time. I just wanted to echo some of the sentiments the local neighbors and property owners have there. There's just some concerns about primarily at the intersection of Sand Dune Shores and 57, the public access that's going to be created through an easement here. It's a safety concern that I would ask the county look at. We also had some questions about the gap funding that was going to be provided and which is due as of April 1st for the sale of this property. And also it was a little concerning that the owners of the property from which the easement was granted, according to the minutes from the October meeting, were never notified about the sale of the property that has the easement. We just learned about this, all of us, in that area in the news story in the Door County Advocate the other day. So we're just asking, and I know you have a lot of correspondence there, that you take a look at some of the concerns. If there's a way to maybe table the sale or at least have a bigger public discussion about this, we would be most appreciative. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? For the second time, is there anyone else who would like to speak? For the third and final time, anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. That concludes the public comment.
Okay, thank you. Is there any supervisor's response? Alexis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to thank the public and everybody that's reached out and provided comments on several of these topics. My comment, I was hoping to get under correspondence, adding in several additional emails I received, if that's okay. Mrs. Peterson's March 22nd email, Ms. Burris's March 22nd letter, which came in through email, Mr. Vlack's, sorry if I, VALCQ, March 1st email, and Mr. Genty Waxberg's March 1st email, all in support of, well, I guess board action for diversity and inclusion, but looking for more information about how we, how the resolution language changed, I guess. So those were other emails that we had received I'd like to see in the packet as well. Thank you.
Kara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also would love to thank everybody who wrote in and called. I think that democracy doesn't work without the public, and it's not something where you just vote and let it be. You have to be engaged, and I'm really appreciative. But what I wanted to say was we didn't have hard copies out on our tables. It was said earlier that there was something about hard copies out on our tables. And I know that Supervisor Bolton, we had questions about that originally.
I was mistaken. It was emailed to you.
Emailed to us.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Bob?
And thank you. That was my question. You had mentioned hard copies, but I do see the email. It's the packet that Jill sent. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I do have that. Thank you.
Megan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to mirror some of the comments that came through from the public and from Alexis as well, and believe that it's really important for us to include the acknowledgement of systemic racism and the word equity back into the resolution that we're going to be discussing and hopefully passing. These are really important parts to that topic. I also did have some, I had a good discussion with community member earlier last week in regards to the issue of
ATVs on County C, and I think that this is definitely something that we need to bring back up for discussion and take a look at the dangerousness of that intersection at Duluth there. So I just wanted to mirror those comments, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Megan. Vinnie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Similarly, as others have said, I also wanted to acknowledge Ann Morgan and Angela Sherman for the letters that they sent to me, also in support of including equity and acknowledging systemic racism in our work that we're doing today. Thank you.
I think that's it. Okay. Approval of the minutes of the February 23rd, 2021 regular meeting. We have a motion and a second. Any changes, additions, deletions, other remarks, or corrections? If not, by voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? County Administrator.
Sure, I'll keep the report kind of brief. You do have the monthly report in the packet summarizing the projects and their status. The one thing I would like to point out in your packet is I did include a communication from NACO. I did provide it at Finance, just in regards to the next set of federal funding that's being allocated to communities. I guess I would draw your attention to page 16 of the packet. Right now, although I guess it's not the official, but the initial allocation to Door County is going to be $5.366 million in federal money that's be coming in as part of the next stimulus. And again, the use of those dollars must meet the criteria that are initially outlined on page 16. And I'm hoping that we'll get more information as that comes forward, and we'll have further discussions, but I just wanted to note that for the county board as reference in terms of us moving forward. Then just in terms of a COVID update, I know Joe's in the back of the room. I know, Joe, could you give us a little bit of an update of where things stand in regards to that? If you could maybe find a mic or come on up, I'd appreciate it. I think Sue's also online, so I could have Sue. If you want me to put Sue on? All right, Sue, I have you unmuted. You have the floor.
Good morning. How's my audio? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks. It's great to be able to relay a lot of good news today with COVID trending down and vaccinations increasing. There's 3 parameters I wanted to mention that are important to watch and are going to help determine when we can safely move into more normal activities. The first is COVID cases, disease activity level. Case numbers here and throughout the state have been lower. We were averaging about 2 a day until a little uptick, which started middle of last week, hoping that's not a trend. There is no particular hotspot or reason that we've identified for this uptick. We are still at high COVID activity level per the state metrics, so please know that. We are at 99.8 cases per 100,000, which is close to the state average of 101 cases per 100,000. Cumulatively, since the beginning of the pandemic, Door County residents, there have been 2,468 cases, 21 deaths. Total ever hospitalized is 84. Currently, we have just 71 active cases. The second parameter to watch is testing positivity rate. We're under 5, which is considered low, so this is good. The 7-day testing positivity rate for us is 4.2%. The average for the state is currently 2.2%. And then the third parameter is population vaccinated. So Door County is doing well on this in comparison with other Wisconsin counties, and Wisconsin is doing well on this in comparison with other states. Across the state, 14.9% of the population is fully vaccinated, so they've completed the vaccine series. In Door County, we're ahead of that at 20.9% fully vaccinated. Across the state, 49% of those age 65 plus have been fully vaccinated, and we are just slightly ahead of that the state on that with 50.2% of those in Door County age 65 plus being fully vaccinated. So again, the three parameters I just mentioned, disease activity level, testing positivity, and percent of population vaccinated are indicators of when we can safely ease into more normal activities. There are other considerations to be watched, such as the new virus variants, and that's certainly going to factor into. The main providers of vaccine in Door County are Public Health and Door County Medical Center. There are some local pharmacies also providing COVID-19 vaccine. We often get the question, which brand vaccine is best or which should I get? All are very effective. And the best brand to get is the one available to you first. As I've said before, our plan is to safely, efficiently, equitably, and as quickly as possible provide vaccine to residents. Our vaccine rollout continues to go well, except of course, vaccine availability is problematic. Our allocations have increased. We could still do at least double, if not triple, the amount of vaccines that we are sent by the state. However, looking hopeful, all indications from the state is that by the end of the month or beginning of next, we should be getting a much more robust supply of vaccine. Our drive-through clinics are working well, due in huge part to our partners, EMS, Chris Hecht and the Fire Chief Coalition Volunteers, and Dan Kane. This week, we'll provide vaccines here in Sturgeon Bay on Wednesday, and on Thursday, we'll provide vaccines on the island. We're planning for a vaccine clinic in Sister Bay in April. We want to address the barriers of travel and other barriers to receiving vaccine. We've begun collaborating with the ADRC and Dortran to do outreach to those who are homebound. We've begun outreach to the Hispanic community. And then I'll just mention in regards to appointment scheduling for public health vaccine clinics, as indicated in the press release that Joe put out the end of last week, right now, we are not taking names, or are we able to add to our wait list? We're working our way through that wait list, and then in the near future, we'll be able to open up to online self-scheduling. And at that time, those currently eligible for vaccine will be able to schedule their own vaccination appointments online. We will leave some appointments open for those who do not use the internet and need to call us to schedule by phone. We don't want lack of internet access to be a barrier for anyone to get vaccine. So please watch for updates, news releases found on our COVID webpage and also on our public health Facebook page. I'm sure you're aware the state opened up eligibility for vaccine to include those with underlying health conditions as of yesterday. And this category is really quite broad. There's a link to the list on our webpage. The state DHS has extensive information on this, and just going to put in a plug, if you've not visited the Wisconsin Department of Health Services website, it has a wealth of data and information, and the frequently asked questions are very helpful. They've indicated that by May 1st at the latest, the state will open up for the general public to be eligible to receive vaccine. So as I started out, there is a lot of positive news. Things are looking good, and of course, we all hope that the end is in sight. We're not out of this yet with emerging variants of COVID. And as we see other states and other countries experiencing surges in cases, it's really essential for all of us to continue practices to prevent COVID spread. Avoid large gatherings, wear a mask when in public, physically distance from others, stay home whenever you can, wash your hands frequently, and get vaccinated when you're able. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Susan. We do have a question. Dan?
Yeah, I guess I could say that I got my shots, and I'd like to compliment the people involved. And there's all kinds of people, you know, the EMS, the health department, and they have done a fantastic job, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Sue.
That's it.
Pending business. Start with Resolution 2021-23, in memoriam of Cletus Fontaine. Dave Engelbert? Wait a second.
Okay, I'm sorry, just scrolled. Okay, in memoriam of Cletus Fontaine, to the Door County Board of Supervisors. Cletus Fontaine passed away on February 23rd, 2021, and whereas Supervisor Fontaine was first elected to the Door County Board of Supervisors and served from April 2006 through April 2014, whereas Supervisor Fontaine represented Supervisory District 1, including the Town of Union and the Town of Brussels Ward 1, and whereas Supervisor Fontaine served on several committees, including Administrative, Ag and Extension, Board of Health, Finance, Glacier Land RC&D, Highway, Land Conservation, Social Services, and whereas Supervisor Fontaine also served as Chairman of Ag and Extension. Now therefore be it resolved that the County Board of Supervisors, assembled in regular session this 23rd day of March 2021, extend our sincere sympathy to the family of Cletus Fontaine with this acknowledgement of his dedication to the citizens of Door County. I'd make a motion to approve that resolution.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you, Dave. By voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution 2021-24, appointment of Mike Orlock to the position of Poet Laureate for Door County, April 2021 to March of 2023. Susan?
Chair, I move that we pass Resolution 2021-24, the appointment of Mike Orlock to the position of Poet Laureate for Door County, Wisconsin, April 2021 to March 2023. Do you want that read?
No, it's fine. Okay. Thank you. By voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We have Mr. Orlock online.
Mike, I'm going to unmute you. You have the floor.
Thank you. I would like to thank the board for their continuing support of written arts in the county, as exemplified by the creation of this particular title of a poet laureate. I follow in the steps of some other very great poets who have lived and worked in this county. Most recently, Nancy Rafal, who I succeed. And it's my intent to continue the fine work that they've done promoting these arts along with an organization like Right on Door County. It's great that you guys on the county board realize that one of the great resources up here is a community of artists who live here and thrive here. And it's a beautiful place, and hopefully their work makes the place more beautiful as well. It's customary, I know, or I've been told, to read a selection or a poem upon this appointment. And I selected one from a collection of poems about Door County called You Can Get Here From There. It's called About Door County, and if you'll indulge me, I'll give this a read through, and then thank you again. A few facts first, for those who need them. The county is named after the strait between the peninsula and Washington Island, where warmer waters of Green Bay collide with colder currents of Lake Michigan, in what early French explorers called Port de Mort Passage, or door to the way of death, a place of dread for ships and sailors, although the locals seem to like it. Nearly 30,000 live here, most sandwiched between the bays, Sturgeon and Sister, and the harbors, Bailey's and Egg, farming thin soil for corn and soy, or pinning their hopes on attracting bees and tourists alike to the cherry and apple orchards that line the roads all the way from Brussels to Gills Rock. There's promise of plump profits if the crop can survive the fickle weather. Fill those roadside markets with ripened fruit. You pick them or they will for a slight charge. That's the way it is up here. Most things for sale, the rest for rent. Tourists come to the county all seasons for different reasons. For summer sun floating in blue bowls of sky, seemingly ladled from the lake. or a furnace of full fall foliage, stoked with color so violently orange, yellow, and red, the forest seems afire with each breath of breeze. They come for winter white under hard light and harder shadows that fold the landscape with crisp creases in fields tucked between farmhouses, posing for postcards, or for spring greenery winking from hillsides of orchards, ready to pop into blossoms of pink and white with the first blush of May. All this is Door County, thumbing a ride to paradise in the two blue waters of Lake Michigan, halfway to the North Pole, dressed to seduce even the most skeptical among us that quiet places can still speak gospel if you listen. Time isn't tied to clocks. Rain can be as refreshing as sun if you let it. And trees talk in tongues only children and fools can understand, in cathedrals that have nothing to do with religion, but everything to do with God. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Resolution 2021-25, Proclamation Travel and Tourism Week. Susan? Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, you didn't turn around.
Oh, sorry.
So nobody in La La Land.
I'm sorry, Susan, you want to do that again? Because nobody outside heard that. Sorry.
Okay. All right, I move we adopt resolution number 2021-25, Proclamation Travel and Tourism Week, May 2nd through 8th, 2021.
Great, thank you. Alexis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had two questions on this. What, if any, events is Door County sponsoring for under this resolution? And what sort of impact does passing a resolution like this have in the community in general? Thank you.
There is no fiscal impact, so we don't provide any funding towards anything with this. It's actually provided to Destination Door County as part of their, I guess, promotions and what they do in terms of how they, I guess, market the county. And then the second half of the question, in terms of, I forgot the other.
Of passing something like this, what does a proclamation of a week do for?
Well,
is it just a marketing thing? Why are we? Yeah,
correct. We've done this for as long as I've been here and in years before that. They just use it again because it is part of the state program for National Tourism Week. So again, they use it as part of their marketing for the county.
Okay, so if we didn't pass it, then there wouldn't be an official proclamation of Travel Week. Is that okay? That's thank
Correct.
you.
Yep.
Okay.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alexis asked the same question I was going to ask, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? If not, by voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Resolution 2021-26, extension of communication site lease with Wisconsin Educational Communication Board. Joel? Wait, hold on. Where is he? Where's Joel? Yeah. Okay.
There we got her. Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2021-26, extension of communication site lease with the Wisconsin Educational Communications Board.
Okay, any questions? Any other explanation? We'll go to the voter board. No, sorry. Hold on, Dave. Go ahead.
I said I've lost my connection.
Oh.
You need to go to the voting board and it's not going to come up for me.
Yep.
Thank you.
Does it say you're not connected again, Ron?
And Dave too?
You both not?
I just have a request to speak, screen, nothing on the.
But your vote was off before. Hey, Jason, it's Barbara. We're having some problems with the voter computer tablets, specifically Rose and David's keeps disconnecting. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it is just the two Engelberts, right?
Yeah. But David's in now, just Roy's not.
Oh, so it worked, okay.
There you go.
Okay, that is passed on a vote of 20 yes, 1 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2021-27, support for water quality task force recommendations. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to adopt resolution 2006-83, extension of communications site lease with the Wisconsin Educational Communications Board. Hey, wait a minute. That's not, I'll make the
No.
motion, but are you sure you wanted to call on me? Because I'm not on that.
No, we just did that one. You're doing the one below it. The 27.
Did I miss one in here?
Yeah, doing the water quality task force,
We're doing the water quality task force resolution.
-27.
Thought something was wrong when I read 2006.
It's on page 25 of the packet.
Wait a minute here.
I'm sorry, not 25.
33.
There we go. That's better.
Okay.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2021-27, support for water quality task force recommendations.
Any explanation?
Sure. If you don't mind, I have Erin online, and the next 3 items are actually all related to her area. So Erin, I'm going to unmute you. If you could provide a summary on each one of those items, I appreciate it. You have the floor.
Sure. Thanks for the time. This resolution, support for water quality task force recommendations, recognizes the importance of clean water to Door County, and it calls on the state of Wisconsin to take action to fund clean water initiatives in the 2021 to 23 state biennial budget. Specifically, the request that we call out here is $13 million annually in the budget for County Conservation Department staffing.
Okay.
Thank you. Then could you give a summary of the next 2 while you have the floor?
Oh, sure. The next resolution following that is approval of a land use agreement with the state of Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. We're asking for county board approval for this land use agreement because of the term length. What the agreement does is it gives permission for Soil and Water to treat Phragmites on the specific property using available grant funding. So we are not obligated to treat beyond the funding that we have available through our grants, and this provides permission for that treatment to occur. The resolution following that, 2021-29, is approval of a multi-discharger phosphorus variance grant. We are looking for the county board to approve accepting funding in the amount of $12,388 from the Village of Casco. This is through a program in which funds from wastewater treatment plants can be used by county conservation departments to install practices to reduce phosphorus loading, and that provides an equivalent reduction that the wastewater treatment plant needs to reduce in order to meet their permit limits.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to address specifically the Water Quality Task Force recommendations. This is something we dealt with in the Legislative Committee, and I'm glad that LCC also had a nice, good, robust conversation about it, and acknowledging there's a number of bills that were brought up last session, and we're hoping that, more support and urging from us will help the state to continue to move on these issues. There's a lot of water issues out there that need to be looked at and dealt with and worked through. So I'm looking forward to supporting this resolution. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay. So this vote will be for supporting the Water Quality Task Force recommendations by voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Resolution 2021-28, approval of land use agreement with State of Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2021-28, approval of land use agreement with State of Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources.
Okay. Any questions? That one also by voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution 2021-29, approval of multi-discharger phosphorus variance grant. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2021-29, approval of multi-discharger phosphorus variance grant.
Any questions? Alexis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aaron, if you're still on, can you help remind me what area that money, you said it has to be spent in the watershed, Casco being in, I don't believe in Door County. Can you help me understand where that money will be targeted for Door County?
Sure. So even though the Village of Casco is in Kewaunee County, it is part of the HUC 10 that includes all of Door County. So we are not required to target the funds other than to identify the areas of greatest need for phosphorus reduction. And so we do have a current project that we're using funding from 2020 in the Anape watershed. And we are obligated to create our plan for how to spend these funds by March 1 of next year. And so what we do is we take a careful look at where we think we can get the most bang for our buck for phosphorus reduction and target those areas.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? If not, this one involves money, so we will go to the voter board. That is passed on a vote of 20 yea, 1 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2021-30, acquisition of PIN 002-02-06292833D, bridge financing transfer and non-budgeted funds. Dave Engelbert.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2021-30 for the bridge financing transfer of non-budgeted funds. It came before the Finance Committee a week ago, and some of the funds through the grant process would not be awarded or really made known until after July 1st. So this provides the funding for the county to move ahead with the purchasing at that time, and the monies should be reimbursed back to the county.
Okay. Grant, you want to add anything?
Not unless somebody has questions.
Any questions? Susan?
I just wonder if Grant could address some of the concerns raised by citizens in the, if that's possible, or maybe Ken, I don't know, somebody.
Sure. So again, with the acquisition of the property does also include an easement that's across the street that goes to the water. That's how we're actually obtaining the grant funds, is because there is a connection to the water. It was discussed both at the Parks Committee in terms of the intended use. As of right now, we're not intending, and I think that's one of the things that was miscommunicated in the article, but the intent is not for us to either cut down trees or establish a gravel trail or anything. Right now, we're going to leave it in its natural state, and it will only be used for, I guess, staff or research purposes. Again, it could change by decision of the board or the future Parks Committee, but at this point in time, it was discussed at length at Facilities and Parks that there was no intended use for making that a enhanced trail down to the water. But again, when it got to the paper and then the residents saw that, there was concern that we're opening that up and we're gonna cut down the trees and put down a trail, so that's where the concern came from. You have to take Grant.
Hold on. Vinnie?
Oh, thank you. I had a similar question, and I would appreciate if someone on the Parks and Facility Committee could show us on a map where the actual easement is. I searched for it based on parcel and name number and couldn't find the easement. And it wasn't in our packet, like identified on the map. The property was in color, but the easement wasn't. So that was the first part. The second part is can you refresh my memory about the grant that we would be receiving? I'm assuming it's a grant that does allow public access to the shore. That's the basis of the grant. Am I correct in assuming that?
I'm on, so.
Yes.
I think I've opined 2 or 3 times now, and I went back and looked at the minutes from the, when resolution number 2020-79 was adopted, that the easement that runs with the property we're purchasing allows the owner of the property access. I think it would be a stretch of the easement language to say that it could be used for public access generally. I think the county has the absolute ability to control how that easement is used. So Ken's explanation was spot on, and I don't think needs further clarification. The funding sources that were opened up by virtue of the easement, the connection of the property to the shoreline, simply require that the county have access to the shoreline. It does not require general public access. And that was one of the attractive things about this property, was not only for the purchase price, but moving forward, the fact that the Meridian Park would be connected to the waters of Lake Michigan by virtue of that easement would open up other funding opportunities for us. I certainly understand the concerns raised by the members of the public, but I think all we can do, as Ken indicated, is state what the present intent of the county board is. I've offered my opinion about what I believe the limitations of the easement are, and that's what we can address. I think it's also important that at today's meeting, the only matter that is before the board is the bridge financing. The authority has already been given to acquire the property. The contract has been entered into between the county and the sellers. And again, the reason for the bridge financing is there are 2 dates that are important. The April 1st date, which is the obligating of the funds, and by that I mean we will have received notice from, well, we've already gotten verification from the Door County, Friends of the Door County Park Systems of the $7,000, the Raybook Foundation of the up to $5,000, and we anticipate getting written verification of the WCMP CELC grant of up to $12,000 on or before April 1st, which satisfies one timeline with the within the contract. The second timeline is July 1st, 2021 for closing, when those funds would actually be available. And the concern is with the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program grant funds, even though they would be obligated in time for that April 1st deadline, we might not actually have those in hand by July 1st. And what the bridge financing allows us to do is to meet that July 1st deadline and then reimburse the county when the Wisconsin Management Program funding becomes available. But it will be committed, so it's not a question of if the county's going to be reimbursed, it's just a matter of when. And if by some chance we have the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program grant dollars in hand prior to July 1st, we won't make use of the bridge financing.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Before I go to the next requested speaker, Jill pointed out that on the map that we received, if you follow the straight yellow line down to where it crosses the road, there's a little pink line there. That little pink line represents the easement.
Location, yeah.
Location, right. 47. Bob?
I guess I just wanted to say, sorry, and I was still looking up the map there, but, and again, this effort is totally in line with the Parks Department mission, so thank you.
Biz?
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the question is for Grant, was this listed to a realtor?
No, we were approached by the estate, and the folks who we're working with are all out of state with respect to this. And I think they knew of our potential interest to add this property to Meridian Park, and we've also had some other dealings with the estate with respect to property in that area. So it was just a mutual interest of ours, and when the property, I can only speak on what I presume happened when the estate decided they wanted to dispose of the property, it reached out to the Facilities and Parks Department and made it be known that the property was available. And is often the case with the Oversight Committee, the marching orders were get the property, but we want no fiscal impact to the county in the acquisition, and that's what we're looking at right now with the grant dollars and the other gifts and donations.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll go to the voter board, which does require a 2/3 vote. That has passed a vote of 19 yea and 2 absent. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move to ordinances. The plan is we'll go through the ordinances. At the end of the ordinances, we will introduce the resolution. I understand there's going to be a written amendment offered. We will then take a break. Everybody have an opportunity to take the time to read that amendment, and then we'll come back and continue to address the resolution. So, under ordinance report amendment to the zoning map of Claybanks. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to accept the report to the Door County Board of Supervisors, amendment to the zoning map of Claybanks.
Is there a second? Thank you, Nancy. Okay.
Are there any questions on that? Is everybody familiar from the information in the packet as to what property we're talking about?
All right, so no questions, so the report can be accepted by a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Ordinance 2021-06, amendment to the zoning map of Claybanks. Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adopt mandatory zoning ordinance 06, amendment to the zoning map of Claybanks.
Thank you. Any questions on that? This one, since it's an ordinance, we need to go to the voter board. That's passed on a vote of 19 yea, 2 absent. Thank you. Report, Wilkie map amendment. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, wait, sorry.
What?
Sorry, wait a second. Vinnie?
Sorry, I just have a quick question. I don't understand how we're doing seconds. Like, I don't see it on the screen, and I don't see or hear anybody doing a second. So I just don't know what the.
On your tablet, you should have on there, you should be able to, when a motion comes up, Jill will prompt the system to.
Okay.
It should pop up on your screen as a motion.
Yep.
And then once you see a motion, then there's also probably a button that you also can hit. So if you wanted to second it, you can do it
I
that way
think
as
there's
well.
a delay in the second because it's not coming up on the screen.
On the screen,
Just-
okay.
Okay, but. Can't hear you. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Sure.
Ken, did you want to add anything?
No, I was gonna go to the
To the,
next report.
okay.
Okay. I'll make a motion to accept the report to the Door County Board of Supervisors, the amendment to the zoning map of Sturgeon Bay.
Okay, now ask if they see it.
Okay, did everybody see the Fisher and Verley motion and second? Okay, okay, thank you. Any questions on the report? By voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Okay. Ordinance 2021-07, Wilkie Map Amendment. Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adopt the amendatory zoning ordinance 2021-07, an amendment to the zoning map of Sturgeon Bay.
Todd?
Yeah, for the record, because this is a voice vote, I will be abstaining from both votes on the Wilkie property.
Anybody else? Okay, great. On the ordinance, okay. All right, we'll go to the voter board for the ordinance. That's passed on a vote of 18 yea, 2 absent, 1 abstention. Thank you. Ordinance 2021-08, invoking the authority of Chapter 59.10.1 Wisconsin statutes to be a self-organized county. We have a motion and a second. Grant, would you like to explain?
Sure, as quickly as I can. And I think it's summed up pretty well in the backup information. This is a very simple procedure. I think sometimes in the past when we've taken this up, we've incorrectly analogized it to cold fusion. By becoming self-organized, the county simply opens up 3 potential variances from what Chapter 59 presently provides for. Those 3 areas are the use of staggered terms for supervisors, compensation of supervisors for attendance at board meetings and paying mileage, and filling vacancies in the office of the county supervisor. It's really that simple. And as was discussed at the administrative committee meeting, simply because Door County would elect to become self-organized doesn't necessarily mean anything needs to change. You could retain the status quo or address one of those 3 items, 2 of those 3 items, or all 3 of those items. It's entirely up to the board's discretion.
Okay. Any questions? Kara?
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering if you lose anything. Like, is there any kind of protections or anything that you lose by becoming self-organizing?
There is, but it's analogous to what I just said. What you what you lose by becoming self-organized is you give not only yourselves, but future boards the ability to make choices as to the 3 items. So you could look at that as expanding the discretion of the county board and sort of unbinding the county board from what's in Chapter 59 with respect to those 3 items. But in reality, there's really no downside because a future county board could choose to be self-organized or could choose to not be self-organized. So in my opinion, there really isn't a downside to deciding to become self-organized. It merely opens up some opportunities.
Thank you. Dave Engelbert?
Yes, I'd be curious about what some of the discussion maybe was, or the opinion of the administrative committee that this is brought forward. I completely understand Grant's explanation, but it seems there must be one of those 3 items, perhaps a compensation, that the administrative committee is likely to recommend the change on. And I guess when things aren't broke, I'm not exactly sure why we're trying to open some of this up, but I'd like to hear some comment.
I can give you my perspective, Dave. Anybody else on the committee is free to speak too. This has come up a couple of times over the last several years. Compensation was one reason it came up. The other reason it came up was when we have to replace a board or leaves their seat, and this is an open term. In the past, on state statutes, it's always been up to the chair to do the interview and make an appointment subject to county board approval. Under this scenario, you could hold special elections, or you can come up with a different way of filling that seat if you wanted to. And that recently became a question when Morgan was appointed. Were there other ways that we could approach filling that position? And this is one of the 3 things that you could change under being self-organized. So that was the reason it came up most recently. So when we looked at it, if you approve it, it doesn't make any change to anything unless the board decides to take one of those 3 items up in the future and debate it and put a resolution in place to actually change it and change our rules of order to reflect that. Until something like that would occur, it doesn't change anything. It just gives you the opportunity to make changes with those 3 areas should the board so choose in the future. And if anybody else at admin wants to comment. Okay. Anybody else? If not, we'll go to the voter board since it's an ordinance. That's passed in a vote of 19 yea, 2 absent. Thank you. Next item, reconsider or rescind a mandatory ordinance 2021-05, amendment of chapter 11.05, DCC ATVs and UTV routes. Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only reason why this was used or added to that ordinance was because it's a request from a municipality. And we only change and add that to the listing of what routes to add is if a request comes. And this request came from the town of Nassau-Wabi to add County Road C to a ATV, UTV route. And if we were to change this, we should have a request from the town of Nassau-Wabi to rescind it. That would be the proper way to do that. Reason why it was passed by the Highway Committee is that there's no record of any accidents from ATV, UTV since this has been going on. There's a whole long list of what routes we have in the county. So that's my recommendation this time. We should wait, and if Nassau-Wabi wishes us to rescind that, that's my recommendation.
Okay, so the issue that we're getting the letters about, really it's the town of Nassau-Wabi that made the request, and we passed our ordinance based on their request.
That is correct.
And so unless they come back and ask us to reconsider, there's no action on our part.
I believe that's right.
Okay. And yes, the city of Sturgeon Bay is doing what they're doing, and they would have to complete what they want to do to complete the trail between Nassau-Wabi and Sturgeon Bay. So until that occurred, nothing else would occur.
That's right.
Okay. Grant, you want to add anything?
Just from a procedural standpoint, this reconsiderations of ordinances can get to be a bit tricky. This ordinance went into effect before it is being reconsidered, so even if the will of the county board was to rescind the ordinance, my recommendation would be that it be referred back to the Highway and Airport Committee with instructions to go through the rescission process and bring it back to county board. I'm not saying that's what the county board should do, but that's the most the county board could do today. But certainly, whether or not to make a recommendation to rescind or not is left to the county board. I guess my role I see is explaining how that might happen if that recommendation was made.
So at this point in time, nothing has changed, and it was Nassau-Waupee that requested it.
Mhm.
So are you saying we should wait till Nassau-Waupee would request it to do something?
I'm saying it would be appropriate from a legal standpoint. It's properly before this board for reconsideration. In many respects, it really doesn't matter how it got here. But what Supervisor Engelbert talked about was correct, is that the town was the one that made the referral, but we're free to say yes, say no, and as it sits today, we would be, by we I mean the County Board of Supervisors, would be entirely within their right to recommend that it be rescinded and send it back to the Highway and Airport Committee with those instructions, but you don't have to. So I guess what I'm saying is it's up to the county board what action it takes today and what rationale it wants to use to formulate what course of action it wants to take is up to the county board.
Okay.
I'm talking.
It's all right. Thank you. Dave Engelbert?
Yes, I guess I'm not in complete agreement with the other Engelbert on the board here. It came to our to our highway committee meeting, and I guess I've always had reservations about the UTVs and so forth on the road, but given the letters that were included in our packet that day, we made a recommendation to send it to county board. Later on, talking to a resident from on that road, he gave me some information on the Nassau-Waupee town meeting, which I believe was on the 18th of February, approximately 10 days after our highway safety meeting, highway committee meeting. And he said the majority of people there were not in support and gave me some further details. I then talked with Jill Lau, who our clerk, and also the clerk for Nassau-Waupee. Looking back, the letter that was included in our February 8th meeting of the highway committee included a letter from Mr. Sullivan, who 10 days later included it on the Nassau-Waupee Town Board meeting agenda. So the letter is really a recommendation, the way I understand, more personally from him as chairman, and we accepted that letter as that's fact. We also had the letter from the chairman of the Parks and Rec Committee, I think it was, from the city of Sturgeon Bay, and that hadn't gone through their process either. So I don't know if it's a case of the chicken and the egg, which comes first. Do you ask the county to support an ordinance that those municipalities haven't really supported themselves in the beginning? It's individuals that were acting, trying to get support from the county to endorse their request to their municipalities. So I guess I'd really like the highway committee to take another look at this. It was brought to my attention by Supervisor Rubelard as well. And then some secondhand information there, I guess, is that perhaps the sheriff's department really wasn't in favor of that use on County C. So there seems to be a lot of question. I think there's a process that should be followed, and I don't know that that was followed in this case by the letters that were provided to us at February 8th.
Okay, thank you. Joel?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to echo the second Engelbert's comments. There's not a larger proponent of UTVs and ATVs on this board than myself. I think everybody's aware of that. I was under the impression at the highway that this had followed all the channels and we were the last stop, that it had been approved by the Nassau-Wappie, that it had worked its way through the city, and it came to us for the final rubber stamp of approving this. However, in light of all the communications we've gotten and then reflecting on this myself and where it's at and him and hawing back and forth, I have also thought that I will, this should get sent back for referral from the highway again. And just from this ordinance, strike line 30 from it and let the ordinance sit as it is, and not approve this today and let it go back for more chewing and hashing out, because there's obviously a lot of people, towns, county, and the city that aren't on the same page here and get this figured out. I'm in support of the ATVs and UTVs for this, but it hasn't followed the process that it needs to give it my 100% support of this at this time. So I would not vote in approval of this as it is.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, echoing Mr. David Engelbert's and Mr. Joel Gunlingson's comments, I would make a motion to rescind this ordinance. I feel like we've been hoodwinked. We have questionable source from the town of Nassau-Wappie, and even worse, or even more concerning, is the questionable, and apparently now there's a legal investigation into walking quorum and other legal, infidelities, if you will, apparently, about what's been going on with on the city side of things. So again, I thought everything was approved. I was totally given, or had the impression, reading the packet, whatever, it all seemed like it was all legit, and that all the proper folks and authorities and dots were, I's were dotted and T's were crossed. And this isn't the first time we've had a little bit of trouble. I feel in the 3 years that I've had the privilege of sitting in this seat, I think each year there's been one of these issues, one in my own town of Bailey's Harbor, where there was confusion about this ATV stuff. I'm just getting a real bad taste in my mouth, and I'm really wondering if I'll vote for any of these UTV routes in the future. But I certainly think, why should our committee spend more time on this? Let's just rescind it. That's the cleanest thing. And let the town of Nassau-Wappie and the city work it out. And then if it rises again to the occasion, we can certainly take it up again. And if it's proven safe and everybody's on board, I would support it. But at this point, I think the cleanest thing is to rescind this amendment for the reasons I stated. And so I make the motion to rescind this resolution. Do I have to push a button for that, or?
There you go.
It says Vogel, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. As long as it's out there, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
They want to do this. Bob makes the motion, now somebody can second it.
Okay, there we go. So we have a motion and a second. Okay. We'll continue discussion.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yeah.
So just to clarify too, this on the motion to rescind, actually, again, as Grant said, we can't officially rescind it because it's already an adopted ordinance. So what you're, in essence, doing is you're advising the highway committee to draft up the language to rescind that line into ordinance, and that would come back in April. So I just want to make sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Procedurally, what we can do. So your motion's fine, but I just want to procedurally how it has to be done is as a body, you're saying that we would prefer to rescind this at this point in time, refer it to highway to take that action to make the changes to the ordinance, and then bring it back in April for official rescinding or dropping of that line.
So be it. Thank you.
Correct.
Appreciate that.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
I guess I have to reiterate the rest of those board members, except for the one, Mr. Engelbert. I think we're putting the cart before the horse in this case, because if the city hasn't approved it, we have just a turnaround. We have a U-turn. And I think that's kind of stupid until we get everything in motion for the right way to do it. So.
Okay. Kara?
Thank you. I would also just want to reiterate what everybody before me had said and support rescinding and sending it back to the highway committee. I was really impressed that people made a YouTube video that was amazing, showing exactly how dangerous it was. So I just wanted to say that was super impressive, and I would support rescinding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Todd?
Yeah, not to lengthen the discussion, I'm in favor of sending it back to committee because I think it's a safe harbor for it for the next month until we hear from the town of Nassau and let the city work out their issues. But I do want to say that this conversation probably should spur some interest to maybe have some uniform legal or resolution throughout the county as it relates to ATVs and UTVs. Like Joel, I am a supporter of ATVs and UTV trails in the county. A number of neighboring counties have taken up ordinances that allow a more of a uniform rulemaking or understanding throughout the county. So I think we should look at that as a county, and we should look at that sooner than later, as it allows law enforcement maybe to eliminate confusion as they try to establish some rules and regulations that police this kind of an act. So anyway, that's my comments.
Okay, thank you. Joel?
Yeah, one final comment, thank you. Just to clarify that what we're doing here today is nothing more than eliminating the addition of County C on this, and that the remaining ordinance is still in effect with lines 13 through 29, and that those routes stay active. So we're not affecting the past portion of the ordinance. We're just not gonna include or approve the addition of the County C portion that was recommended for today, just that we're making sure we're doing that properly.
I'm learning to wait for the red light.
Yeah.
Joe, what we're recommending is that it be sent back to the Highway and Airport Committee with directions to rescind the recent route that was added. My comments at the beginning were such that when you reconsider an ordinance that's already gone into effect, you have to go through the same process to rescind it. So we'll get there, but we won't get there until the April meeting of County Board, if that makes sense.
It does. I guess my point is that using the term rescind here means that we're going to undo something that we've already done.
Correct.
We haven't done it yet because we haven't approved it yet.
No, we did last month. That's why it was approved last month. We adopted it last month.
For this portion of...
Yes, yes.
Oh, I missed that.
You're on an island for that one.
I was here.
David Engelbert.
Yes, I'd like to echo some of Supervisor Theis's comments that I think we probably need more of a process of examining these road requests that come before the Highway Committee and then the County Board. I haven't looked into what Kewaunee County does, but I'm more of an understanding there that they're really not allowed on some of the county roads. So we're working with our neighbors there. We need to have a policy in place, I think, that recognizes the difference in municipalities, and I think safety should always be a consideration with these requests. Thank you.
Thank you. Biz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with most of what's being said here in resending it because I think the highway department, when this goes back to them, they should wait and let Nassau work this out with the city. They didn't pass anything on for the Duluth Avenue thing because they're waiting back to see what's going on here, and Nassau needs to talk to the city about this and get that ironed out before they move forward on this ATV route on County C.
Anybody else? If not, we'll go to our voter board.
Joel, please vote.
That is passed on a vote of 19 yea, 2 absent. Thank you. Okay, back up to resolutions. Resolution 2021-31, Door County's vision of diversity and inclusion. Someone want to make a motion? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Vinnie?
I'd like to make an amendment to the resolution 2021-31. I have a written amendment that Jill would pass out to the board. That would be great. And I would like to begin with addressing the discussion that came up at the administration committee meeting this month, that equity is a form of socialism. This illustrates the training that we need to understand that inequity is created by systems that are designed to favor one group over another. Done intentionally or unintentionally, there are hundreds of studies with peer-reviewed data and legal cases that have proven inequity and systematic racism. This is the education that needs to occur. It's not about political ideas or common ground. It's about looking at facts from these studies and the history of our nation. We can consider things such as the treatment of indigenous people in broken treaties, Japanese containment camps, Jim Crow laws, voter suppression, equal rights amendment work for women, redlining and housing policies across the nation, and the fact that millions of Black veterans did not receive or qualify for the GI education bill after World War II. There are many other examples to make this case of inequitable policies that do not create level playing fields and still today have resulted in a legacy of inequity. Addressing equity today is not about socialism, it's about justice for citizens as it is written in the Constitution. Diversity, equity, and inclusion work is time-consuming and overwhelming at times, but it is well worth the investment. In diversity, equity, and inclusion work, the word equity is defined as fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all people, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. Tackling equity issues requires an understanding of the root causes of outcome disparities within our society. Those outcome disparities are what started across the state of Wisconsin, the movement to address racism as a public health crisis. This is why the amendment I put forth today focuses on equity and includes action steps to be taken, such as including diversity, equity, and inclusion work in our budget process, collecting and analyzing data based on equity so we have the best information to identify root causes of health disparities, and creating an advisory committee to address identified health disparities and to oversee ongoing training in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Acknowledging systematic racism is essential. This begins with identifying the role of racism in our community. We received many letters before our meeting today that show different forms of racism people have experienced in our county. And then although people of color are often left out of our history books, you can do a search on any kind of online newspaper in Door County and find hundreds of articles that reflect every form of racism in Door County that our state has endured since the mid-1800s. Migrant work camp programs that sustained Door County orchards for decades had biased housing and worker rights. Things happen. Presently, we hear stories from international workers who have experienced bias based on their accent or their non-whiteness. Look in our schools and you will find that most every student from a minority group can identify as having experienced racism today. Many efforts and wonderful programs have been established to address inequities in our county, but to assume that every group of people has been or is currently treated with equality is false in our county. Committing to take an objective look at our policies and practices to determine how improvements can be made and then taking action to address diversity, equity, and inclusion will strengthen our county, will increase our resources and our humanity. As a county government, we are expected to take leadership on these issues in our society and communities by setting the best standard we can. We must include acknowledging systematic racism, including equity, and taking action in this resolution as I suggest in the amendment. Thank you for taking the time to read it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so as I said, we're going to take a recess now, give everybody an opportunity, since the amendment has been proposed, to read it. So we will.
Do you have a second on the amendment?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to recess until 5 to 11, 15 minutes. Now we're good?
Yeah.
Okay, we're back in session. I guess I want to remind everybody that there were 5 or 6 people that wanted to speak when the original motion was put forward. There was an immediate amendment, so now what we're discussing is the amendment, okay? You can still say whatever you like, but the debate is on the amendment. Okay? Todd?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple comments regarding this topic in general, and then as it relates to the amendment and the original resolution. Obviously, this has been batted around our county board here for a number of months, and probably for good reason. You know, trying to get some sort of a quorum or group of folks that came to some sort of agreement on language that could be supported. Obviously, last meeting, we sent this back to the admin committee, which as a new supervisor, I view that as somewhat of a senior committee, and I don't mean that in terms of age, but I mean it in terms of tenure. There seems to be folks on that committee that have been around the county board for a number of years and understand the rules, regulations, and procedures, and I certainly respect that. I think before we succumb to the temptation of amending the words that are on our current resolution 2021-31, I think that this deserves a vote as this resolution stands here today unamended. And the reason I say that is just because of the time that this topic has been through numerous committees of the county board. Changing a word here or changing a word there or adding a sentence can certainly change the meaning of the strong debate that was had in the admin committee just last week. I think it was last week. And I strongly urge that as supervisors, we give this amendment as is written a chance to pass this floor as it sits here today. And if not, then it go back to committee or it go back to some other form or some amendment from this floor. I would hate to see this resolution and the work of the past several months and the admin committee go unrecognized and unvoted. So I certainly recommend that we resist the temptation to wordsmith this thing and try to make it better, because I don't think it will ever be perfect, because people will debate as a body of 21 how an insertion or a deletion changes the meaning of what was intended. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Cara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If this new resolution needs a vote, then I think the prior one deserved a vote. I want to preface anything I say with the statement that we've been working on this since late summer, early fall of 2020, and this is an entirely different resolution. I want to make sure to express that even in the original racism is a public health crisis, it had no teeth. And we still had to expend so much energy for not even the bare minimum. We weren't asking for reparations. We weren't asking for anything substantial or concrete, even though this was a logical and rational and fact and evidence-based statement. We still had to center whiteness. We had to coddle whiteness. We had to cater to whiteness. We know that the original was data-based because of the overwhelming amount of studies proving it. Last summer, I read a CNN article citing a study that Black babies are more likely to die when cared for by white doctors. But this didn't go the other way. It was the bias held by white doctors, because white babies they don't die more when cared for by Black doctors. And also in the US, Black children are 10 times more likely to die of complications from asthma because of environmental racism. There's an epidemic of amputations due to the diabetes that affects Black Americans. So these health impacts are measurable. They're not due to race, but specifically due to racism. So that's why the past resolution was entirely evidence-based and logical. And I want to make sure that I swing back to how this entire experience is evidence of how we made it to center the experiences and comfort white people. The new resolution was only brought forth so that people wouldn't be called racist by voting no on the first one. I want to know, and answer in your heads for me, would you want to be treated the way Black Americans are treated in America? And if you're honest, you answered no, then you do know that racism is a problem, an immense problem, and a debilitating problem. It's just a problem for you, or it's just a problem that you can ignore. It's not a problem that you have to experience. You can walk away from it. So then, even though you've answered no, you can still just walk away. And that's your privilege. And you're so scared of the first resolution, in calling it like harsh, or of being called racist. but it wouldn't have harmed you in any way. It doesn't have any harm at all for a white person. And I believe the original resolution was important because the acknowledgement is an important first step. And Americans have been conditioned to simply look away from profound harms, and acknowledging it is important. And I think that this, the amendment to the resolution is good. And I would just say that we should hold ourselves accountable by allotting monetarily specific goals. And the CARES package that our administrator told us about in the beginning absolutely has allowable allotment for things like housing for seasonal workers, or for funding for the nonprofit Help of Door County, or specific things like loans for women. We could include things that actually have teeth to them, and I think that's exactly where we need to be. If I were voting on this resolution as it is in our packet, I would be voting no in protest unless there are substantial changes, because it doesn't have meaning or sincerity behind it. But I can always promise you that I'm going to keep bringing up racial justice issues, workers' rights issues, and I'm going to be looking at things through a poverty lens, because I'm going to stand unequivocally on the side of those who are oppressed. This isn't a one and done resolution for me. It's not a game. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Susan?
It's been my honor and privilege to serve on the county board. In my 9 years on county board, I have come to love and respect this body, this county government, the county staff, and the services they provide our citizens. One thing I've often told people is that local government is the one level of government that still works, that we've always been able to debate, even argue, issues civilly and vote on opposite sides, while still at the end of the meeting being able to leave respecting each other's opinions to debate another day. But not this time. On this issue, the county board is no longer working. I think it's fair to say that right now much of the board is divided. All of us are frustrated and angry with at least one other board member, if not many other board members. And there are lots of reasons for this. To name a few, the COVID-created stress, worry, anger in our community has affected us. The inability during a pandemic to get to know each other by building board relationships in the normal way. Even the inability to all be in the same room, looking across the desks at each other in order to find common ground. And just as important, this issue itself. This is the most important, most difficult issue that I, and I think we, have had to face as county board members. This issue challenges everything each of us believes, as well as what our friends and family believe. This issue hits us where we live, in our core, in our heart of hearts. This issue is emotional, uncomfortable, scary. This issue represents the most basic foundation of our community. This issue is who we are as people, as a community, as a country. I'm challenging us today to look past our anger and frustration with each other, to use Lincoln's words, to find our better angels, and to find common ground on a meaningful resolution that offers hope to all of our citizens. So with regard to the amendment or the packet resolution, whatever we pass today, I believe has to have three things in it. One, the word equity must be put back in the resolution. Diversity will not become inclusion without equity. Equity does not mean socialism. My Webster dictionary has two synonyms for equity: fairness and impartiality. I find it hard to imagine any of us arguing that we should be unfair. It means a level playing field so that each citizen can compete to strive to reach their maximum potential. Without fairness, we will never become an inclusive society. It also needs to have, number two, the concept of institutional and systemic discrimination and inequity. They must become clearly acknowledged, part of the resolution. This inequity has driven policies and laws that have been put in place throughout our history, to thwart all of the marginalized groups listed in the resolution. Our history documents example after example of this, not accidental or happenstance or occasional inequities, real, institutional, systemic, and intentional inequities. We can do better. And third, what needs to be in whichever resolution we pass, the suggestions of activities for moving this process forward must also be part of the resolution. They are crucial if we are serious about providing a prosperous, secure place for our citizens. We can do this together in the best interests of the people of this county. In my letter to you last month, I said that this would take courage and humility on all our parts to accomplish something positive. And I meant exactly that. It takes courage to look deep into ourselves and courage to speak publicly what we believe. It takes humility to realize that we do not have all the answers, and humility to treat each other with respect, even if we hate what the other person says. We can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Roy?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Nissa?
Thank you, and it's kind of hard to follow Susie because she said a lot of amazing things. My generation is big on saying be on the right side of history. And while I get that language was removed from the original draft and it was compared to socialism, I look at it as maybe not treating other people like crap. The problem with removing some language in the original idea is the fact that words have meaning. We all know words have meaning. There are words you can't and shouldn't ever say because they have meaning. So maybe by putting in those words that have meaning in a positive way and in a good way, returning them to the resolution is better than just having a watered down garbage resolution that just makes us look and feel good and think and have us feel like we did something amazing when in reality we did nothing. Using our feelings and thoughts to look better to the community is not the same as doing something that actually accomplishes. We are, I've described the county as the whitest county on earth to other people not from the area. And the reason why I've done that, look at the county board, and that's not an insult to anyone. We represent what the county is, but the world isn't necessarily that way. And we have to realize that the world doesn't necessarily look like us, act like us, talk like us. And we need to represent the people in the community and the people who come here on vacation to make them feel safe, make them feel secure, and like we actually care, not like we are just saying some words to sound like we mean something. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Megan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to reiterate some of what I shared in last month's board meeting. Towards the end of our discussion, I shared that I oftentimes have people of color asking me where it is safe for them to go. And what I did not include in that discussion is that there are actually places, businesses that I have to tell them to avoid. And I think that that right there is very impactful to this decision because of experiences I have heard of from customers, from locals. There are actually places in this county where I would suggest to people of color, for them to not give their time and their business because they might have an experience that would adversely impact them. And then I also want to address, I'm really, really taken aback by the comparison of equity to socialism. We are talking about public health here. We are talking about how others should be treated in order to be able to pursue their best wellness, their happiness, and be on the same equitable playing field as someone who happens to have been born white. This is not socialism. This is not anything close to socialism. We need to be very careful with our words. We need to include these words back into this resolution. It needs to be amended in order for the board to pass something meaningful in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. David Engelbart?
Yes, thank you. I guess, as Todd has said, this went to the administrative committee and they've discussed this at length too. I think what came forward in the packet is something that we can all accept and work from there. The community is real divided on this. I've talked to a number of constituents and outside of town into Gardner, and they kind of ask, well, why are you doing this? What are you seeing? And, you know, you try to explain it as best you can, but it seems that sometimes the proponents here are saying that we're ignorant or we're not inclusive in our opinions. Yet, you know, a couple months back, maybe 3, we had a speaker from WCA here and talked about how our community helps shape us. Well, as alluded this morning, yes, I'm a Belgian from Union and Brussels, and my great-grandfather came in 1856 at the age of 17. They struggled. He walked, the story goes, he walked to Chicago to earn extra money for the family to survive. My grandfather later said, you know, he hired Native Americans to help on the farm, or the Mexicans that came up at that time, called Mexicans, to harvest beets and so forth. We've all had our struggles. Great-grandfather Felix first served on the county board, I believe in 1870, less than 20, you know, approximately 20 years after he came here. 1880, I believe it was. But anyway, we have strong roots to that community. We have religious values that we accept, and norms that maybe aren't all perfect, but that's what shapes us. And to try to go too far with issues too fast, even if they're the biggest issues out of Door County, the people here question what we're doing. And I have to vote as my constituents feel and support the amendment that the administrative committee brought forward.
Thank you, Dave. Bob Boltman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am grateful for everyone's time on this, both in this room and in the public. We've received a lot of letters, I've gotten phone calls. It's a heavy and complicated issue, and I, for one, wish I could take the stress off my heart that I've been feeling over all of this, but I also understand that's part of why we're here and why we've accepted the privilege. And, you know, we're here to do hard work sometimes. We've heard story after story after story of flagrant racism right here in our community, right on our sidewalks, right in our coffee shops, in our restaurants, in our boarding establishments. I was devastated, completely devastated to know that young people were being called the N-word in our community, out loud and in public. It's affected me in a really profound way. To think that people have to seek out safe places and have to ask where it is to go to be safe, that's not okay. These instances have shocked and woke me to realities that I assumed were from an era bygone. And I guess I look at this and we have the chance to leave these things back in 1949 when there were still signs in shop windows that said, whites only, no blacks. And times after World War II when, people were still rounding up black workers and driving them to the border of the county like dogs, saying, don't come back. That did happen a long time ago, and we have a chance to step away from that. I've heard people saying they're afraid of being labeled, and I'm not aware of any label being given to anybody. I've heard no bad words being said towards anybody who I haven't heard any labeling of racism. And I guess when I think about a label, you get a label by your actions and by your words. You get a label by the way you carry your body through life and the way you interact with people, not what other people say about you. So that fear of a label is, come on, people. We're not, nobody's labeling anybody. I'm not. And if somebody is labeling them, I would like to know who it is and have a conversation with them. I'd like us to recall the words of Supervisor Cunard last time. These profound words that we are here to hold each other capable. To hold each other capable. We are capable. This is a moral issue. And I appreciate Mr. Engelbert bringing up our religious faiths. What would Jesus do? How did Jesus live his life? I'm pretty sure I know where Jesus stands on this. This is not a time to go along to get along. This is a moral issue. It sucks when our decisions, when our political situation gets into morality. I don't like it. And this is all the issues, whether it's abortion or whatever other issues in life that become moral. It's hard for us sitting in these seats. I don't like it. I'm as uncomfortable as hell right now. But this is not a time to go along to get along. It's okay to draw a line in the sand and to step across that line, even with trepidation, because you are being held in a group of people here who are holding you capable. Our community is holding us capable. We need to acknowledge racism in our community, in our county, not just say, oh, it happens somewhere else in the country. Socialism is a political system. Equity and socialism are two totally different things. To equate the two is completely clouding the issue. It's not pie. Equity and equality for others does not mean you get less. It's not pie. When I hear students and young people in this county talk about looking forward to leaving this place because it's closed-minded and racist, and they experience the racism in their classrooms, in our high schools, in this county, it breaks my heart. The effects of racism are suppressive and affect us all. We have an opportunity to take the lead and set the example, and that means being anti-racist. That means stepping across that line in the sand. I urge us to support this amended resolution brought forth by Supervisor Shomo. We spent a lot of time on this, and I think it's been a good and healthy process. The Legislative Committee rolled this around, and we took resolutions that were being passed around this country as people were rioting in the streets. Thank God that's not happening right now, right? But unless we change our ways and become anti-racist, the windows are going to get broken, the cars are going to get turned over, people are going to get shot. I don't want to see any of that anymore, and we don't have any control over that directly, but we do by making a statement. And that's all this is. We're just making a statement. Nobody's asking you to do anything, just to be bold and be held capable. We had a resolution we took a resolution that was being passed right on the heels of all of this really extreme stuff, right? Extreme community unrest. And it went through some iterations, and it came forth, and people said, no, we don't like the wording, it's too, so I guess I think of it as a pendulum. It kind of was one kind of over here, and then it went back. The administrative committee scrubbed a lot of the important language out of it and went the other way, and now what we have in front of us is brilliant. This is the perfect middle ground, and this is something we can all rally behind. So please support what Ms. Shomo so bravely and diligently brought forward to us today. Thank you very much.
Vinnie?
Thank you for the dialogue from everyone and for the thoughts and ideas and care that you put into this. I just wanted to go to the amendment itself, if you did not have time to read it during the break, and very quickly go through the 4 key action items, as I do think it is a statement followed with some substantive action. I had asked for the action back in the summer when the legislative committee brought this forward and was looking at ways to do this. Racism as a public health crisis was a model we were able to use as a standard, as a base point. That is substantially changed by the administration committee, and that's why I put forward the amendment to begin with. So looking at putting it as a budget item is one action. Another action is having an advisory committee with diverse committee members that would help do this work. We can't do all this work and resolve all this today. It takes a process. Included in this, as was in the the resolution as it before amended, does include race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, disability, age, and socioeconomic status as identifiers that this can occur, not just racism, but racism is included clearly. Develop a consistent method for data collection, looking at our internal policies. What data are we collecting about these different identifying groups to even know where we stand? And I think our county is very progressive and does really good work in these areas, but without collecting the data and providing that analysis to county board members, we really can't make an educated decision about changing policies for how these health discrepancies may be happening amongst these groups if we don't have the information coming into us on these various groups. And then developing and implementing a comprehensive approach that incorporates systematic, structural, and institutional changes that respond to these health discrepancies. That's a lot of words, but that basically means we're looking at how we get the information back, and then we can make an educated decision on which actions to take. But if we don't take the action to put it in as a budget item and to create a way to do this work, it won't be more than a piece of paper that gets put into our resolution files. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinnie. Nissa?
One quick story I debated on mentioning because this happened to somebody I know. A coworker of my husband's was moving to the county from the Green Bay area. And she was going to look at a rental. She waited around, nobody showed up, the prospective landlord. So after she got back home, she tried calling the landlord to reset up a time or find out what happened. And the exact response that she was given by the prospective landlord, and this is in this county, was, "We don't rent to Mexicans." And understandably, she was upset. She was mad. Didn't know what to do. I made some phone calls on her behalf to get a hold of a few people who would give her the time of day, and not based off of the color of her skin, but based off of the fact that she had a decent job, she could afford it, and all the actual qualities that should be looked at in a prospective tenant. My issue with that is how would equity in this story be compared to socialism? Because she'd be treated fairly because of the fact that she had a job where she could afford it, a year-round job, which, as we all know, is not always common in this county. The fact that someone looked out their window and wouldn't even greet her because she's Hispanic. That's wrong. And yes, this happened in this area. We need to do better. And to do better is to actually use equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Nissa. Okay, we will go to the voter board to vote. We're voting on the amendment. Question?
Yes, we're voting.
Wait.
Yes, we're voting yea or nay to Supervisor Shomo's amendment.
That's correct.
That's what we're dealing with now?
Right, it'd be, right, we're voting yea or nay on Supervisor Shomo's diversity, equity, and inclusion, racism, and public health crisis amendment that she passed out.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Momentarily.
Just keep them both, whichever one's working at the time.
Thank you. So it's done?
Yeah, you're tallied. You can see that.
Okay. The amendment has passed by a vote of 10 yes, 9 no, and 2 absent. That's it, right? There's
No, you gotta vote. It's just a vote on the amendment, so you have to vote on the motion now.
Okay, okay. All right, so the amendment has passed, so now we have to vote on that being the final resolution. So the amendment becomes the resolution, correct, Grant?
Correct.
Okay. Right, the amended resolution, right? Yes.
I guess, before you vote, can I ask a question on that? Because I guess this, my biggest thing is, again, so like, for example, if we're establishing a committee, is that a committee of the public, a committee of the board? Or are we gonna define that later? Who defines that? There's not any, it's written, but it's not written in clear in terms of who's establishing what and responsibility for that, so it's fine if you're gonna vote on it now and then refer to the admin committee as far as clarification on those things, but I guess it's not clear in my mind what we're establishing from this resolution, so I just wanted to.
Well, when you put that, next month is the reorganizational meeting when you would normally put new committees and such in place. So wouldn't we make those recommendations and bring it back to the county board for their approval?
Okay. Well, I'm just asking, because I mean, an advisory committee, is that an advisory citizen committee? Is it an advisory committee like CATS to the admin committee of county board supervisors? I guess I'm just looking for clarification of what stuff you want me to bring forward in terms of, again, that can be clarified at admin too, I guess it's fine, but I'm just looking for clarification on that.
I don't think we have those answers at the moment. We'd have to bring it forward.
Okay.
But. Kara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do feel like it's very clear when it says, be it further resolved that the Door County Board of Supervisors directs administration to provide a written memo to the board no later than 3 months after the adoption of this resolution to communicate an implementation timeline for the following items. I think that specifically says that, so I think this is totally passable as is, and it says that it's just asking for admin to provide a written memo to the board about clarification for those things. Thank you.
Vinny?
Thank you. And for clarification, I would completely trust the usual process that we have for creating committees, for determining their work and their ability to be established, if that's citizen advisory, if that's county board included. I think that that's a wonderful way for our system to work as it normally does in that request and is timelined, as the implementation timeline to be handed in, then not for all this work to be achieved within 3 months, but for the plan for how to move it forward is built into this specifically to address that way to work as we usually do through our committees and forming new committees. Thank you.
Dave Engelbert?
Yes, I think the process is really in place. It's for the administrator and the administrative committee to decide what the makeup is for this committee and how it moves forward, and bring those recommendations to the board.
Okay, thank you. Okay. The voter board. What? You are voting to approve the amendment as presented by Supervisor Shomo that was approved.
As it stands.
Correct. That's passed by a majority vote of 10 to 9 and 2 absent. Thank you. Okay. Any special reports? Any oral committee reports? Committee minutes? Vouchers, claims, and bills? Announcements. The next regular county board meeting, which will be our reorganizational meeting, is April 20th, 2021 at 9 a.m.
We do have an announcement too.
Go ahead.
Jill, can I have our sound? Just an announcement for Door County Legislative Days. We will be announcing both the teams, hopefully later today. We're going to be conducting training. They'll be done here, but also you could sign up online to attend those. They'll be on Tuesday, the 30th at 3 p.m. or a second session will be offered on Thursday, the 1st at 6 p.m. And just a reminder that the sessions will be on April 7th and 8th from, I'm putting down 8, we'll officially probably start at 8:30 from 8 until 12:15.
Can you keep those dates of the training?
The training is on Tuesday, the 30th at 3 p.m. The alternate date is Thursday, the 1st at 6 p.m. And again, with the actual sessions going forward on the 7th and 8th from 8 until 12:15. And we will be sending out hopefully emails today or tomorrow with the team assignments. And I know some of the county board members will be like team leads, so we'll go through the training and the assignments and what has to be done for all that when we go through the training next week.
Okay. Alexis, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question back under the review committee minutes from the admin committee this month. It was an agenda item about the rule changes for the April meeting. I'm just wondering, could you elaborate a little bit on what rules are up for changing, how that process works?
Sure.
So just a little background on that.
At the annual reorganizational meeting, any changes that we want to make to committees, committee assignments, rules changes, committee responsibilities, etc., is what is brought forward to be voted on by the board. Any supervisor can forward any changes that they would like to see, and that'll go to the admin committee, and the admin committee puts it together and then brings it to the floor. But they can also be amended on the floor directly during our organizational meeting. Grant, do you want to add anything to that?
Simply that if you have any changes that you're thinking about, get them to David, Ken, or I at least a week before the April 20th meeting so that we can make sure they get on the agenda.
Megan, did you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Ken, if you wouldn't mind stating those dates and times again, I'm writing them down and
Sure.
making room in my schedule. Thank you.
So again, the training, there's two options. You don't need to attend both. So the training again is on Tuesday. That'd be the 30th, next Tuesday, the 30th at 3 p.m. And then Thursday, the 1st at 6 p.m. And again, the actual DK days themselves, in terms of the event itself, is on April 7th and 8th. That's a Wednesday, Thursday. And again, from 8 until 12:15.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
The meeting per diem code is 323. Biz, hold on.
The training, and then the April 7th and 8th, this is all virtual?
The training on the 30th and the 1st is virtual. Then for the 7th and 8th, if you're signed up for DK days, you actually will come here and you'll do a virtual session with the legislators. But you have to come here to do the meeting with the legislators.
So all of it's virtual?
Correct.
Thank you.
There's no other business to complete, and motion to adjourn would be in order.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everyone.